From the late 40s all the way up till 1972, in the middle of New York, a blind man with a peculiar appearance could often be spotted. He was dressed in a Viking outfit, wearing a horned helmet, holding a spear, and standing completely still. As this strange-looking man stood there, hundreds, maybe thousands of people were passing him by every single day. Almost all of whom had no idea who this man was. Almost all of whom knew nothing of the vast catalog of music and poetry this man, who called himself Moondog, had created. Lewis Hardin began on the 26th of May, 1916. By our modern measures, he had quite a strange, old-timey childhood. He rode to school on a horse, lived in a primitive log cabin, and would often fish and hunt, even from an early age. At 5 years old, Lewis constructed a drum set out of some boxes and would enthusiastically play it. Seeing this, his father, who was a missionary, took the young Lewis, now 6, to a reservation for the native Arapaho tribe, where he got to witness a sun dance and sit in the lap of the chief while playing a drum. Maybe it was this that truly opened his eyes to the wonders of music, as the steady rhythms of Native American traditional music echoed throughout Hardin's musical output for his entire career. "I'm into swing. I get that from the American Indians like the Sioux, the Arapaho, and the Apache. I use that almost all the time on this record. I claim that swing came from them," Hardin would later say. On the 4th of July, 1932, a 16-year-old Hardin came upon a curious object in a field. Having no idea what it was, Hardin began playing with it, when suddenly, the object, which was actually a dynamite cap, exploded in his face. This unfortunate event left Lewis Hardin permanently blind. About a year after Lewis lost his sight, his sister read him a book called The First Violin, and inspired by this book, Lewis decided that he was to become a musician. In the early 1940s, Lewis moved to New York to try to make a living through his music. This, however, was not as easy as he may have hoped, and Lewis barely scraped by, making his money through begging, as well as posing for art students. As luck would have it, though, one day, in the mid-40s, while Lewis was standing outside of Carnegie Hall, the chief conductor,
Arthur
Rodinsky, invited him in. From that day onward, Lewis was allowed to sit in while the orchestra practiced. Through this, Lewis learned a lot about classical music. And so, Lewis went on, sitting in at the rehearsals, or spending his time outside quietly writing poetry, making his living by busking and selling sheet music. A few years later, in 1947, Lewis assumed the name Moondog, a name that he got from a bulldog that he loved in his childhood, who would often be howling at the moon. Around this time, as he was studying Old Norse, Moondog also decided to begin wearing his famous cape and horned helmet, fashioning himself as a Viking. This would earn him the now famous nickname, the Viking of 6th Avenue, as that was the place where he would often be seen standing. This would also go on to create trouble for him, not least at the Carnegie Hall rehearsals he had been sitting in at. There, Moondog was given an ultimatum. He would either come to the rehearsals dressed normally, or be banned from them. He chose the latter, later stating in an interview, "I valued my freedom of dress more than I cared to advance my career as a composer. I just wanted to do my own thing." Most likely fueled by this and similar events, Moondog had grown sick of New York, so he decided to leave the Big Apple to try to find somewhere where he'd rather spend his time. At first, he had his eyes set on the Navajo in New Mexico, thinking he might fit in better with a more traditional, down-to-earth lifestyle. The Navajo, however, rejected Moondog. Moondog completely gave up on living with a Navajo when a group of them led him between lanes on a busy highway and then left him there. Moondog instead began traveling around the country, not finding anywhere to settle down. In 1949, as this journey came to a close, Moondog found himself, once again, back in New York. He returned to standing out on the street, begging and busking. While standing out on the street, he would make friends with many of those who took the time to stop and talk to him, often giving out songs or poetry as a kind of souvenir. One rather funny story describes one man's chance meeting with Moondog, where, upon realizing that Moondog was blind, his first thought was him wondering whether or not he was actually aware that he was wearing a Viking outfit. While busking, Moondog would play a trimba, a triangular percussion instrument he himself had designed, which was constructed by a cabinet maker living in New York. Here you can see a video of his protege, the Swedish Stefan Lakatos, playing this instrument. And here's a little clip of Moondog himself playing it too, just for good measure. While standing out on the streets of New York, Moondog made friends with many now, or already then, famous composers, including jazz legend Charlie Parker, nicknamed Bird, and they even had plans of making an album together. But before these plans could ever come to fruition, Charlie Parker suddenly died. It was due to this early death that Moondog decided to write the piece Bird's Lament, dedicated to Parker, which would later go on to become Moondog's most famous piece. During a trip to Germany in 1972, where he was originally only meant to stay for 2 concerts, he told an interviewer that he had lost his passport and would therefore be unable to return to America, at least for the time being. After having spent a while in Germany, Moondog realized that he'd rather live there than go back to America anyway. So he bid farewell to 6th Avenue, the street where he had so often stood, and took up more or less permanent residence in the land of Deutsch. These years, after he moved to Germany, marked, in general, a great point in Moondog's life, as he would get to hear his music played live at several concerts, often through the help of a young German student named Ilona Goebel, and he would also get to collaborate with interested musicians and spend time in his favorite countries, visiting landmarks such as the Teodoberg Forest. Moondog was also noted as finding great humor in some of the Swedish and German road signs, particularly the ones reading Infart and Ausfahrt. However, in 1981, a crushing blow to Moondog's identity came when, at an exhibition at Naturhistoriska Riksmuseet on Vikings, he found out, for the first time in his life, that Viking helmets did not actually have horns. So what about his music? Well, Moondog's style of music often seems to sit somewhere between jazz and classical music. A lot of his pieces have this constant thumping, hypnotic 4-on-the-floor drum rhythm, which really pulls you into the blaring horns and looping arrangements. The closest musical analogy I could think of for his more orchestral arrangements might be Stephen Reich. Moondog also saw great significance in numbers, especially 3 and 9, as those are seen to be the most divine in paganism. Because of this, throughout his career, Moondog was set upon composing 81 symphonies. Because, as we all know, 8 + 1 is 9, and 9 × 9 is 81. Moondog died on the 8th of September, 1999. One day off from the 9th of September, 1999. There won't be a date with more 9s in it than that, for about 8,000 years. He was given this tomb, designed by Austrian artist Ernst Fuchs. Louis Hardin, the man who called himself Moondog, was described as a very warm, productive and creative man, with a childlike fascination for the world. According to Stefan Lakatos, he would produce several pieces of music a day. I think this recording of him speaking to Stefan Lakatos, playing an old recording he had made of his dogs chewing on bones, best shows his very personable and positive nature.
The next tape you hear will be recorded at my farm in the wintertime, and I have led the dogs out and tied them and turned on my tape machine, and the next voice you hear will be Moondog 1972 in the winter.
Mm-hmm.
Then you'll hear the dogs chewing on the big soup bone.
Should I press the button?
Yeah.
Okay.
The sound of Frey and Freya chewing on big soup bones. All right, here you go.
Sounds like the fence, that Grace wolf, yeah, chewing powerful teeth.
Isn't that great?
It's great.
Like chisels, just chewing those muscles off the bone. Yeah. Oh, great. Beautiful.
Yeah.
But that's a great sound, you know. It's you can see what's going on.
Yeah.
You can see it all just from the sounds, you know. All those white teeth shining there in the night, the moonlight. Ah. The snow all around. And you hear them breathing when they're chewing, yeah. It's great. That's a very primitive sound.
Yeah, it is.
Oh my, is that primitive. Makes you hungry just to hear it.
Yeah.
And you know, those two dogs are the happiest dogs in the world, you know, when they had that big bone to work on.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's really, they're not even in this world, they're in the dreamland.
Yeah. A dreamland of
Yeah,
bones.
oh yeah. Give a dog a bone and he's in heaven. Yeah. Mhm. All
Okay.
right. Yeah.
I wonder what the Swedish people will say when they hear this.
Oh, they'll say that man Moondog is really living in the old times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Moondog may have left our world, but he lives on in some sense, both through the legend of his life, but also through his music and poetry. Today, Moondog is not at all completely unknown. His music is still being listened to, and stories of strange chance meetings with him on the streets of New York still get told, both online and offline. A lot of his music has been remixed and covered too. For example, DJ Scruff in his Get a Move On heavily features parts of Moondog's Bird's Lament. And just a few months ago, as of this video's release, the reasonably famous indie folk band Whitney released a cover of his song High on a Rocky Ledge. I realized something while writing the script for this video, that perhaps the reason why Moondog longed so much for a primitive society was that he was permanently blinded as a result of the machinations of technology. As, if dynamite had never been invented, Moondog would have never lost his sight. But who knows? Maybe if he had never been blinded, he would have never felt such a strong need to create his art. Now we have come to the part of the video where we have to wish farewell to Moondog. At least for now. But before that, I would like to impart upon you the small, ever-relevant couplet written by Moondog. Having healthy, wealthy possibility amounts to nothing if you do not know that every minute counts.